Hey everyone, James Azar here, the CISO and hosting this webinar on behalf of the Hacker News. Welcome. Joining me is Maor Ben. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes for today's webinar here on how to tackle the top SaaS challenges of 2023. So we'll give them a few more minutes before we get started, Maor. But while we wait for people to hop in here and, with back-to-back Zoom meetings and whatnot, how are you doing today, Maor?
Doing just fine. How are you?
I'm excited for this webinar because I think SaaS is a big one, right? 2023, I think, is going to be a year we're all going to remember that as a service is going to be as a security service eventually. So I'm excited.
No, SaaS security is always a top of mind topic when it comes to security professional. And I look forward to having this conversation and, talking about the challenges of SaaS security in 2023.
Yeah, we'll give it just another minute here for everyone already tuning in. Just so y'all know, everyone tuning in here for today's webinar, you can comment and ask questions below. We're going to try to get to them. I promise you we're going to try and pull your questions while Maor's going through the webinar and address as many of them as we possibly can while respecting your time, because we know your time is valuable. So we want to make sure we answer your questions. If we don't get to your questions, at the end, Maor is brave enough to share his email address with all of you. And so you can bombard him with questions in his inbox and make sure he doesn't sleep for a whole night while replying. So we'll give it just about 15 more seconds before we kick off today's webinar. Thank you all for tuning in. And thanks for Adaptive Shield for being a partner here at the Hacker News for this webinar series. Really appreciate it. Maor, I think we've got enough people in the room. Let's get the ball rolling. So, hey, security pros, welcome to another awesome webinar of the Hacker News webinar series. We've got a great one here with us. I'm James Azar. I'm the CISO practitioner, a security practitioner and CISO, and the moderator for today's webinar. And Maor and I have Maor has a very exciting topic. I'm just going to be tagging along for today's webinar. So I want to introduce all of you to Maor Ben, who is a former cybersecurity intelligence officer in the IDF, has over 17 years in cybersecurity leadership roles, including leading the SaaS threat detection research over at Proofpoint. He's currently the CEO and co-founder of Adaptive Shield, the SaaS security posture management solution. And we've got an awesome topic today on how to tackle the top SaaS challenges for 2023. Maor, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. And let's get the ball rolling.
No, thank you for the brief introduction. And looking forward to starting this conversation and getting started. Again, no need to go further into introduction, just a brief introduction maybe about what we do at Adaptive Shield. So as you said earlier, the leader in SaaS security posture management, and what it means is that we help security team securing their entire SaaS and all the SaaS application they're facing these days, and having the same controls and mechanism in place as they have in other segments in their organization. So briefly going over the agenda, so we're going to cover some of the 2023. James hasn't really started, and we're already facing some bridges, unfortunately. So we're going to cover some of them and going to talk and give some background about what we experienced so far. After that, we're going to drill down about how to secure really the SaaS ecosystem. What is SaaS ecosystem, and how to secure SaaS application in general. And after that, I think it only makes sense to talk about the challenges that we're facing as security experts when it comes to the SaaS environment that we have in our organizations. And how can you not summarize it all with key takeaways and some related resources that we can go ahead and read more about this topic. So let's get started, right? So when we're talking about 2023, we're already facing, and I included here some of the late attacks that we as a community experienced in late 2022. But I think everybody heard about this kind of attack that recently occurred, including the Nissan North America GoDaddy breach, and the Slack and GitHub repositories that were hacked as part of the Slack breach. And I think that, what is very common into this kind of attack, that, threat actors in this particular attacks, were after code repository. I mean, in the GoDaddy, there was a code that was stolen, but
Right.
it wasn't a repository that was breached. And I found it very interesting. When it comes to SaaS applications, obviously we're not talking about only Git repositories or data in general, but the focus on these particular three are, I mean, the common characteristics, maybe you might call it, that we're talking about stolen code, right? And I think I found it very interesting. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing up, I think, three breaches that have kept a lot of people like me awake, wanting to get more information, study them, and talk to security partners about what they really mean. But I think this all goes back to SolarWinds, right? SolarWinds was kind of the kickoff to all three of those. Why are you going after code? Why are you going after SaaS providers? Well, look at what happened at SolarWinds. Through SolarWinds, they got to Microsoft. Through SolarWinds, they got into GitHub. Through GitHub, they got into Twilio. Through Twilio, they got into Slack, GoDaddy, Nissan. I mean, you bring up a interconnected system that many don't know where to get started on. So yeah, you're spot on here. I mean, these breaches are concerning, nonetheless.
Yeah. And I think, even though, we're talking about, stolen code or stolen IP of these companies, I mean, this is obviously not the only risk of SaaS security. And when we talk about data security in general, I mean, obviously code repository are just one of them. But when we talk about SaaS security, there are many security controls that we need to take in place in order to secure our SaaS estate. But just wanted to give, our audience quick look on, I mean, we haven't really started the year and already seen, some attacks and some highlighted threat actors that are already targeting, top tier companies. So yeah, when we talk about how to, or the life cycle of securing SaaS, so when we talk about security in general, we always talk about prevention, detection, and response, right? This is the life cycle we're looking after when examining our security policy and our security procedures. And frankly speaking, SaaS security is not different, right? So I like to divide it into two phases. First of all, start with posture management. Understand what are the controls and native security controls that you need and can utilize as part of the systems that you're implementing. I always like to compare it like, you buy a house, right? And this house comes with native security controls like doors and windows, right? So first of all, you don't install an alarm system, right? Just lock the door, lock the window, right? So this is the equivalent of what we're talking about, posture, like appropriate posture management and security hygiene when it comes to your SaaS security. And the other side is doing more advanced stuff, right? Understanding each and every event, try to put it in like one huge data lake, which you can analyze, different threats or, malicious apps, compromised users, and cross-reference it with other controls you might have in your environment. So when we talk about, the SaaS security ecosystem, it's really not different from all the other things you're doing in your organization in other segments. So for example, when we talk about posture management, we all doing that for our infrastructure, right? Everybody understand that if you set up a new server, you need to do like the compliance check and hardening. Same goes for devices, right? But when it comes to your SaaS security, sometimes things are falling between the cracks, most likely because, in order to adapt a new SaaS application and as, an organization that is using, many SaaS applications, and we see it constantly in all organizations and all the clients that are currently working with us. They all use SaaS applications, and the reason we have so many SaaS applications as an organization, not only us but the entire industry, is because it's very easy to adapt a new SaaS application, right? I mean, James, frankly speaking, if you want to adopt a new SaaS application, all you need to do is just 10 minutes of your time and a credit card, right?
And in most cases, yeah. I mean, the problem is not just adapting how easy it is, it's shadow SaaS, right?
Yeah,
Like, shadow SaaS is someone in marketing going and spending money and adding an application that processes data that you don't even know about.
totally agree. I think one of the challenges is identifying, shadow apps. But as soon as you identify, you also need to set an appropriate process of how to secure, these SaaS application, which we talk about the foundation of security, really. And then after you've done that, you identify all the shadow apps, right? And define a process of which one you want to keep, and go ahead and do the foundation of security, and do this posture and continuous posture management process across them. You also want to continuously monitoring and look for potential threats and set up the relevant response playbooks that are relevant to your organization. So when we talk about really securing the SaaS ecosystem, again, we're talking about prevention, detection, and response, and make sure you have and implementing these foundations that we're talking about here. So yeah, when we talk about really the challenges, and when I say, when I talk about these challenges, we can translate each and every one of them to really security threats and security risk in your organization. And the first one is obviously, SaaS misconfiguration. And each one of these SaaS applications that we have in our organization comes with a proper native security controls that you can utilize out of the box and make sure, you harden your environment. And just by doing that, you're implementing really good, you can get it into a really good security shape. Moreover, moving forward, all these SaaS application, part of the idea of SaaS application, as you said earlier, James, is to have them in sort of an interconnected kind of communication, right? Meaning connecting one app to the other. And this is where we see and facing, the SaaS to SaaS problem, which
what you're talking about, Maor, is the app to app store, right? Every app has its own app store with its own integrations, with its own like set of challenges. And so you end up with not only SaaS to SaaS access, but you're listing them here, right? Device to SaaS user risk, but user to SaaS user risk, data to SaaS user risk. You're naming them. I think you're being very generous with 5 challenges.
No, I try to. I like to stay focused, and be precise on the kind of things that we are seeing and facing as part of securing, our SaaS estate, right? And you're hitting the nail on the head where you're saying about and talking about marketplaces, and what I like to refer this SaaS to SaaS access, or this old application. I like to compare it to the kind of the new executable file, because if I'm gonna send you an email, right, with an executable file, not to double click it, but somehow when I send you a link for granting permissions to a particular OAuth applications, somehow people clicking and approving and granting this permission without hesitating, which I found very, I don't know, weird, right? Because but
I think that's because our awareness training hasn't covered yet the fact that OAuth is right. Like, you don't want to click on every OAuth link you get, right? We're so cool. The basics of awareness training there, what you're talking about, the user risk, right, is an area of opportunity, right? I think for a lot of people here is, what's your awareness program look like? Ask yourself that question.
Yeah. Obviously, when we're talking about device to SaaS, is actually, all these SaaS applications are somewhere, in the cloud. But when we talk about, how do we access these SaaS application, we obviously talking about, our devices. So we need to make sure that, the relevant controls in your device are also in place. obviously, a huge part of SaaS security is identity and access governance. We need to understand, different entities, different identities, within our SaaS estate. And how can we not, when we talk about identity, threat detection is also a huge part of it. Because if we implement each and every control that, or facing each one of the challenges that I presented, above, we can reduce significantly the number of threats that we will be facing, as part of our day-to-day. But still, when we talk about security, it's always wise to have defense in depth, right? So even if you implement all the controls and all the foundation of security as part of your process, it's always good to have continuous monitoring, look for threat actors that are trying to access and get like trying to compromise some accounts. So yeah, these are the top 5 challenges that we see, and which we see, customer facing in their day-to-day when it comes to SaaS security. So, when we talk about misconfigurations, I think that, and this is what I'm sharing here, James, is one of our key findings of the joint survey that we conducted with Cloud Security Alliance in 2022. And we're gonna introduce another one shortly in the next coming months, again, with Cloud Security Alliance, CSA, which gonna show the trends for 2023. So, stay tuned to that. But, just to cover what we were seeing back then in 2022. So, we were asking some of the companies that took these surveys, like, did you experience a security incident due to a SaaS misconfiguration? And I found it, very interesting to see that, most of them were responding yes. Some of them said, unsure, which is another way to say yes, right? And only 38% said no, right? And this is a very interesting idea. So we'll try to understand, what are the SaaS misconfigurations that, can lead into a security breach. And obviously, the most common example would be probably MFA, right? Or SSO. If you don't do that, I mean,
do you think roles and permissions also play a role? Because that's one of the questions I'm seeing here from someone on the side looking at this survey is, do you think roles and permissions also play an issue with misconfigurations on SaaS? Because most people don't really fully comprehend the SaaS application and the different roles and access controls you can give.
Yeah, I think one of the main challenges is actually, the idea that security team is responsible on the policy side and the application owner are responsible on managing these applications. And when it comes to, understanding how to approach this and do, like, for example, permission trimming, so you always see a gap between the security team and the application owners because, the security guy will come to the application owner and say, hey, our application is secure. And the response always going to be, of course. All right. But
we've got a SOC too.
but at the end of the day, you have many native security controls. One of them are, permissions and roles, which you can go ahead and understand better in order to reduce, the attack surface and be able to control the relevant, security mechanisms that you can go ahead and implement. So, for example, you can say that, for example, in Salesforce, you have some security settings of changing, for example, some management items that applies to all users, right? Which I find very dangerous. And obviously, you need to do some maintenance work and hygiene work, security hygiene work, in order to make sure only the relevant people can manage, different settings in your Salesforce instance. So this is a very common one. So let's try to drill down into some more misconfigurations that can lead to security threats or security breaches, right? So we covered earlier, we spoke about MFA and SSO, which probably, the most common example, but I want to grab your attention, James, to the idea of local credentials, the idea behind people bypassing SSO, right? And this is a very common feature that we see across all SaaS applications, which also makes sense to me, because sometimes you want to be able and enable, for example, super admins in this environment to bypass SSO by design, right? This is not a security breach or
Well, it's
anything like
redundancy, right? It's redundancy. What happens if my Active Directory, my SSO service went down? Do I not have access to my applications?
that. Right. Exactly. This is, you're hitting the nail on the head. This is precisely, why this SaaS application implementing this control. However, we as a security experts, we need to set up the relevant, controls. Bless you, James.
I love the
Set
mute
up.
button.
Yeah. Set up the relevant security controls, in order to make sure, our identity governance is still, in place and not affected by these controls. And most people, they think, yeah, I'm gonna implement SSO, so I'm secure, right? But in fact, you have these local credentials and users that can actually bypass SSO. Now, the reason this is a problem, that obviously you need it for the org to keep, for the reason you mentioned, right? But on the other hand, threat actors can abuse this, policy and controls in order to bypass SSO, right? If a regular users can do it, so threat actors can also do it. And this is why this is a security breach. And this is also obviously one example. We see it across all the applications. This particular example is what you're seeing right here is actually
Well, I
one.
mean, you
Yeah.
bring up, I think you're bringing up a problem that is much larger, right, Maor? And I think what you're mentioning here, I think you're kind of discounting it to some basics. But there's a bigger issue with that, where if you don't disable local creds on some of these SSO applications, if you, or if you don't use best practices around SSO management, third parties that you forget to take away because you're not using SSO,
Oh
because by
yeah,
default the help desk doesn't know, you're just maintaining access for people there.
absolutely. I think, in my eyes, this is a whole different problem, which is
Right.
also, one of the challenges and part of misconfiguration, which is user offboarding, right?
Yep.
That you need to take care of. But absolutely, I only was trying to give, a specific example because, we were talking about misconfiguration and how this can lead to a security breach. But obviously, one of the, when you're looking at SaaS security tools, this is definitely a valid feature and something that you might look for when looking at your security tools that you choose in order to secure your SaaS apps. So, we mentioned earlier SaaS to SaaS access, and you also mentioned, the um, SolarWinds hack, which at some point, led to some sort of a supply chain attack, which also included,
Yeah,
some.
it didn't. At some point, it led to it. I mean, they were able to get to
Yeah.
Microsoft source code from it. I mean, they
Oh
they
yeah.
got access to, Log4j and Log4Shell all came as a result of SolarWinds.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, one of the reasons is that, organizations today, they have, thousands of connected apps to their environment. Now, when it comes to our devices, we have a process in place. We call it application control. Everybody knows it, right? And the idea behind it is to block or prevent executions of specific applications that we don't allow. But when it comes again to SaaS applications, somehow things are falling between the cracks, right? Because these auth applications, as we mentioned earlier, are like executable files. And the idea of having this application control for SaaS application and connected app is just essential, right? And sometimes, these apps can go, unchecked because all I need to do is just double click and grant the permissions, but it presents a huge risk to an organization.
So we've got a question here from the audience on,
Yeah.
on this specific issue that you talk about, which is more around the risk, right?
Yeah.
So, um, the question is, can third-party risk from SaaS apps be mitigated through corporate policy? But I mean, when you look at like the third bullet here, right? The 39% of apps connected to Microsoft 365 and 10% to Google Workspaces with permission. I mean, this question now to me like really does resonate. How can you even mitigate this risk right now?
Well, you need to set up some policies in place. First of all, you need visibility, right? You cannot set up policy without having the right visibility in place. After that, you need to normalize the data, understand what is a high risk scope, what is a low risk scope, understand, whether this scope is has a write access or read access or full access maybe, and then you can build up your policy and doing the process of what I mentioned earlier, right? Application control across your SaaS application. So most likely this is something that can be mitigated. You can do it manually or having a tool that will help you, do the things for you continuously if you prioritize this as a risk to your organization.
Yeah, shout out to Adam for that question. Sorry I didn't say his name first, but
Yeah, yeah.
all right, go ahead, Mar.
All right. So another some metrics, around you mentioned earlier, so part of the survey and research that we presented around third-party apps. So we took, Office 365 and G Suite. So obviously you can see more apps that are connected to your Google Workspace, right? And I think, one of the reasons is because Google Workspace is also kind of an identity provider, right? So it's very easy to just grant permissions and say, yeah, I'm using this as a
Are you
authentication.
making a sales case for Microsoft right now, Mar?
The opposite. I think it's Google, right? Yeah,
I don't know. As a security guy, you kind of feel better with 3,500 and 13,000, right?
yeah, yeah. No, but I think, when we talk about, so the idea is not just about the numbers, right? It's just about the scope. It's about the scope. So for example, I can tell you, yes, some of the application just have read access to your profile, meaning they can tell that you're James Azar, right? And this is your email address, and this is your profile information, but not more than that, which can present a different risk, right? When it comes to storing PII or personal information for that say, but on the other hand, you have some other apps that might present a bigger risk in Office 365 maybe. But what I think is interesting is, when the company size is getting bigger, the more apps they utilize, right? Which I think one of the key findings of this
It
research.
goes into shadow IT, right? It goes into
Exactly.
shadow apps, right?
Precisely. Yeah.
That visibility that you keep talking about is so critical. These numbers are by the way, crazy. 3,500 apps,
Yeah.
13,000 apps. Think of an organization of 5,000 people or below on G Suite that has 1,300 apps with probably a security team of 5 to 10 people.
Yeah. That's crazy. I
Right?
totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a practitioner, I would take a screenshot of the slide and show it to someone in your org and go, this is our biggest challenge in SaaS. Has to be
Yeah,
one
I
of them.
think better than that, we can. I mean, we can, share later on the link to this, research, and people can absolutely go ahead and download it and get the full research for sure. So yeah, when it comes to SaaS access, and this is one of the screenshots from our tool to just show the audience how this should be managed and how this should be enriched and get the relevant context for each SaaS applications. But it not only stops with relevant and different permissions and scopes. We're now seeing a trend really of malicious third-party apps, which we already detected in some organizations and some of our clients. And to be honest, I was shocked that our research team came up with these findings, because when we talk about really, I mean, I talked earlier about how these OS applications are the new executable file. So this is exactly the evolution that we're seeing, right? I mean, starting with dangerous and over permissive apps, going into malicious intent application that we see installed in some organization, which is really scary in my opinion. What do you think, James?
So I'm actually reading the questions here from the crowd, and I want to pull. I know people are enjoying our back and forth, but a lot of people are in here, and I want to be mindful of some of their questions, if you don't mind. Um, so, I mean, there's a few here. Let me pick one. Um, and again, to everyone watching us live now, thank you. I see your questions. As moderator, my job is to pull some that I think really play into this. And so I really kind of want to go over to this threat detection capability, right? Um, so we have a question here, and I'm going to butcher someone's name. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to try to pronounce their name while you answer it. So, how does threat detection through an SSPM solution improve a company's ability to detect and respond to threats?
Yeah, so when it comes to threat detection, threats can come in multiple forms. Could be, a raw configuration, could be a malicious apps that we just mentioned, or could be, user activities and actions that a particular user is taking. So, for example, an admin that is granting for himself, permissions to access the CFO's email address, right? So it doesn't need to be like an external threat. It can also be like an insider threat. Now, obviously, everybody's aware of the email compromise threats and users brute forcing accounts, which appropriate SSPM solutions should cover as well. But the more like insider threats or exotic cases of malicious applications, which we keep seeing more and more, are most definitely something you should look for when it comes to understanding your threat detection policy.
All right, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. So when we talk about device to SaaS, so we talked about it earlier briefly. We're talking about SaaS application in general. What is it related to our device? So obviously, everybody's talking about zero trust these days, right? And this is a policy that you should implement as part of your day-to-day security. Now, what it really means is that you need to make sure only authorized devices and users, are accessing your environment. Now, when our entire environment and our entire IT stack actually moved into two major components in the cloud, one of them is infrastructure, the other one is your IT, your SaaS IT, right? So you only have two options to really understand, all the controls you need to take, in these applications, and the other one is to understand, how users are actually accessing these applications and infrastructure, right? And the answer is their devices. Therefore, it's essential to understand, device hygiene and understand, what users are actually. So, for example, if you see a problematic device with, like, for example, 3 critical vulnerabilities, you might want to look on the user context as well and understand whether this user has privilege roles and some other things that you want to check on the user context. Um, so yeah, this is absolutely essential when we're talking about user to SaaS security. And as you can see here, another screenshot from our product that we utilize and consume information from CrowdStrike if this is an application you're using to secure your device. But we connect for example for and retrieving information from other applications like Intune and Tenable and more. So yeah, make sure you have proper visibility on the user device, meaning, if you go to the CrowdStrike dashboard or any other tool dashboard, you'd be able to see information about the device, but you need to correlate that with the relevant users. Need to make sure you have the right context and remediation guidelines to go ahead and see, all the different device checks, vulnerabilities, and everything that is related to that. When it comes to device and I think we covered most of the things, but device also include your identity. And identity, when we talk about identity, we're not only talking about users, but we're talking about the entire suite. So it could include devices, include your permissions, your role, and everything that is related, and is an integral part of your SaaS applications. Um, So, make sure you monitor all these different identities when it comes to your SaaS estate and securing your identity governance. And again, when we're talking about, different items that we should include in our policies to make sure, for example, and look for things like inactive session timeouts, or, SSO or SAML authentication, or look for these, local credentials, identify inactive users, dormant accounts, external users. Sometimes, we are, our research team and customer success team are very surprised to find sometimes, external admins in some of these applications, or, even more dangerous, an admin with a Gmail address. I mean, this is
Yeah, because
crazy.
you hired some third party person to help you get something done and you never revoked access. I mean, the stuff you're talking about here kind of sticks to it, but it kind of takes me to another question here we have from the crowd. And this one is from a gentleman by the name of Avery, and they're asking in a service, kind of in a SaaS model world where you have a shared responsibility models, are you not seeing this be part of the shared responsibility challenge?
Absolutely. I think that, the shared responsibility when it comes to SaaS application really talks about several things. So first of all, the SaaS vendors needs to go ahead and secure their infrastructure, meaning that, they need to go ahead and do the patching process of CVEs, and do the entire, security of their infrastructure. Uh, Also, part of their responsibility is to open up native security controls, like we talked earlier about misconfiguration, and, user permissions and user roles, being able to go ahead and define different roles and different permissions into different users or different entities in your environment. But it's your responsibility, and this is where it comes to the shared responsibility, right? So it's the vendor responsibility to do and exposing to you all these native security controls and secure the infrastructure, but it's your responsibility as a client to go ahead and, making sure your policy is aligned with, all the native security controls that you can go ahead and utilize as part of it. And yes, being able to monitor, privilege roles, and identifying, and do the mapping and separation of duties is part of your responsibilities. The SaaS vendor will most likely, open these things to you, whether it's through an API, or through the dashboard, and you'd be able to access and consume this information. But it's your responsibility to build and apply our policy based on these native security controls.
Yeah, brilliant. Great question there.
Yeah. Cool. Um, so yeah, when we talk about these things, I mean, obviously we have a bullet list here of items that we covered. And I think, one of the things that we need to mention and utilize, it's not only the permissions, but also, connecting it to your activity monitoring. Which leads me to the topic of ITDR and threat detection, obviously. So, the idea behind it is and I'm gonna briefly go through real quick about the use cases that we see. So obviously, user and app compromise, and general attacks like brute forcing a specific accounts, or data loss and data leakage, or things that can lead to data loss and data leakage. Look for indicator of compromise, across, our SaaS estate, which, you'll need to make sure you have a tool that can normalize all the different events and all the different activities, and has this, what I like to refer as SaaS expertise, right? Because each SaaS is different, and each SaaS behave in a different way, and you need to understand what are the capabilities and what are the dangerous action each user is taking as part of the day-to-day activity. So when we talk about users and when we talk about threat detection, we need to combine between the two, and this is where or what we refer as identity threat detection and response. And when we talk about, understanding and drilling down into these activities, so we want to divide and map and make sure we normalize each and every event throughout the different components of the native security or native logs that the SaaS vendors is providing us, not necessarily related to threats, but sometimes related to actions which we can go ahead and investigate after. So for example, a user, could install a specific application or could create a forwarding rule, right, which can after that can lead us and be an indicator of compromise and could be harmless, right? Doesn't mean every action or every log item that we see in our SaaS estate is dangerous, but we need to make sure we know how to investigate it and know how to produce, a productive threats and alerts out of it. So, an essential part is to obviously, being able to investigate, but obviously, streamline the data into other SIEM and have, playbooks as part of your security orchestration process or your SIEM.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about is this new threat surface that's called SaaS, right?
Yeah.
And you talked a lot about SSO. I actually have a question around the SSO tax.
Sure.
So in a lot of the CISO groups I'm a part of, right? One of the big challenges with SaaS providers in a lot of cases is that they want to charge you extra money for a single sign-on,
Yeah.
right? Which you've been really talking about that, and I think that that's really hindering and security, because at that point you're thinking you're going to spend X dollars for X application and X service. Now you've got to pay extra, and the application owner is going to security and saying, well, you're requiring SSO. SSO costs an extra $10,000 a year. You pay for it. How do you see that kind of developing over time?
Well, as a security vendor, I think this is absolutely ridiculous, obviously, right? Charging extra for a security feature needs to be part of the value proposition. And when we talk about really the shared responsibility model, this is part of the vendor responsibility, right? To provide and for you to utilize, security tools. And each one of these SaaS applications actually is a security tool because they present, lots of native security controls that you need to utilize. I think that, most likely most of the vendors, understand that they need to provide, MFA controls and SSO controls as part of the regular value proposition. And I think we're going to see more and more of it. Obviously, as a security vendor, I think, this is absolutely essential, right? But
I hope you're right. I can tell you that our CISO Slack channel, we've got a blacklist of people who charge you extra for SSO.
yeah. Yeah. No, of course. This is something we are totally aware of, and we can see lots of expenses through enterprises that implementing and paying this extra has, how you call it, SSO tax, right? So yeah. Yeah. So again, when we talk about threat detection, we're seeing, more and more idea, and the idea is to really, grab all the information that you can take and then utilize it and make sure you implement like the relevant procedures as you implement in other procedures in your organization, like MITRE or NIST, or all these kind of frameworks that you refer to when it comes to preparing your attack. So we're pretty much on time, and just to summarize everything, I think that, SaaS security is an emerging space, right? We're seeing more and more, and we talked about the security challenges, right? Which includes, SaaS misconfiguration, SaaS to SaaS access, device to SaaS, identity and access management, and ITDR, which I think we covered, pretty much the challenges that we see organizations are facing with. And in order to handle these challenges, I think the key idea is to, first of all, get visibility. After that, get, control over your SaaS estate. And I think, with more applications that security teams need to go ahead and secure, they're lacking of control rather than, having control. And you can do it rather, you can decide whether you invest and do it manually with manual tools, or you take like the approach of automation and implement, a commercial tool as part of your SaaS security strategy.
So we have a few questions here. I want to try and get to them because I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. But we've got some really good questions here. So one, adaptiveshield.com. Don't forget the dash between adaptive and shield when you're going to the website. Please, that's that, right? And Maor is going to be brave enough here in a few minutes to share his email address. So all the questions we couldn't answer, you can just email them to Maor and say question from webinar in the subject line, and he'll get to those. But we've got a question from Manish talking about how do you get your company to take SaaS security seriously.
Well, this is an idea of education and understanding, the different components that you need to secure. And as we said earlier, you do these kind of things across your entire stacks and other segments in your organization. So just make sure you understand the top challenges and things, and you identify the relevant risk to your organization. Just show, the management that you're already investing in other segments in the organization and do the exact same thing. Now you need to implement the exact same process into your SaaS security estate.
All right, and we've got a question here from Kusar. I'm sorry. Again, I'm trying to difficult names. I'm trying to say them right, so I apologize to you. But how common are malicious third-party SaaS applications?
So, frankly speaking,
from what you've seen.
Yeah, frankly speaking, this is something that we do see. It's not like out of the ordinary, and we keep seeing it in more and more accounts that we monitor. We usually see it in big enterprises, right, rather than smaller ones. But it's not that we see it in each and every account, right? But it's not something that is unheard of.
All right, Dimitri is asking, and this will be the final question here from the crowd, folks, because I just want to be respectful of time. So I do apologize. But given that, SaaS is essentially all cloud-based and data is all cloud-based, how important is device hygiene to SaaS security?
So, yeah, again, in my opinion, and I think, we covered that in the slide where we talked about, device to SaaS, I think that it's super essential, right? Because when we're talking about securing the application itself, but what about securing the device that making you access this application? So for example, think about the scenario that this device is compromised, so everything is compromised. Like, for example, the SaaS application will be compromised and everything you do on this device will be compromised. So this is absolutely
including the tokens. Just so that everyone here knows, including your SSO tokens. Those SSO tokens that you're so clearly care about. Those are compromised there as well. Well, I've got a personal question for you, and I've thrown in two of my personal questions. This is my second one for the webinar today, so I apologize for everyone. But as moderator, I get priority. I'm joking. Do you have any predictions for 2023 on SaaS security?
Yeah, so I think, SaaS security in 2023, and this is something we actually see across the board, is getting more and more priority because, when you move to the cloud, and I shared earlier that, the entire IT stack moved to the cloud, and it moved to, first of all, infrastructure, and second, when it comes to application, the entire IT stack moved to the stack, to SaaS, sorry. And I think that, most CISOs and most security teams, they understand today they need to prioritize SaaS security. In terms of security threats, I think that we will see more threat actors abusing good features for bad things, right? I always like to say threat actors using good for bad, right? And this is exactly how, when it comes to SaaS application, SaaS vendors exposing great features, which after that threat actors abusing them into do bad stuff. So
by the way, I just want to point, there's a slide on the screen with a bunch of links and resources. We're putting those in the chat. If you don't get those in the chat, we'll, like I said, Maor's email is about to come up here, so that's why none of you have logged out. You can email him and ask for some of these, or you can go to adaptiveshield.com, and all of these links are also there as well in the resources section, right, Maor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Maor, first of all, I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Really,
I appreciate it.
thank you for being here. Thank you for everyone who attended and took time to be with us here on the Hacker News webinars. I can't tell you how grateful we are. And we know how many of these everyone gets invited to, but we're grateful that you chose the Hacker News webinars to be part of how you get further educated on dealing with security challenges. So you can go to thehackernews.com for all the latest news and stories and educational tips that are available. Thank you to Maor, Ben, and his team over at Adaptive Shield. You can go check them out. And Maor, you want to go ahead and put your email out so everyone can start emailing you now. All right. I'd love to see like your background now just start go ding 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 ding. And that would have been great. So with that being said, again, hackernews.com. Thank you to the Maor and team. Maor, any last words to our awesome audience that's been with us here for the last 50 minutes today?
No, I just wanted to thank you for the time, James. It was absolutely, wonderful time. And yeah, thank you for all the questions and feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for all of your participation. Thank you all for tuning in. Thehackernews.com for all the latest. My name is James Cesar. On behalf of Maor, Ben, and the Adaptive Shield team, we want to thank you for your time and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.